Welcome back, everyone. Every day, we hear how innovation is rapidly changing our energy and environmental landscape. This session, Emerging Business Opportunities, focuses on ways in which the environment, energy innovation, and the economy build upon one another. Today's panelists will discuss emerging business trends, including efforts in hydrogen, carbon capture, utilization and sequestration, and energy management. Moderator for this session is Kari Johnson, Environmental Scientist Consultant for the Kentucky Department for Environmental Protection Commissioner's Office. Kari, I will now turn the screen over to you.
Thank you, Eileen, for that great introduction. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Vanessa Chan. She is the Chief Commercialization Officer for the Department of Energy and Director of the Office of Technology Transitions. In this role, she is responsible for all commercialization activities across DOE, the 17 national laboratories, and the department's other research and production facilities across the country. She is an innovator who has worked across a wide range of ecosystems, from academia to Fortune 1000 companies to startups. She has 2 decades of experience helping organizations grow at the interface of technology and business across a diverse set of industries. Ms. Chan earned her PhD in Materials Science and Engineering from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and her BSc in Materials Science and Engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. With that, Ms. Chan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Kari. Good morning. Governor Beshear, Mr. Adkins, Secretary Goodman, and the people of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, I really appreciate your inviting me to participate in the 45th Annual Governor's Conference on Energy and Environment. I'm really excited to be here with you today, but wish we could be in person, but we'll have to do it virtual. So as Kari mentioned, I serve as the U.S. Department of Energy's Chief Commercialization Officer and Director to the Office of Technology Transitions. And I wanted to applaud Governor Beshear and his all of the above energy policy, because of which Kentuckians are poised to reap the economic benefits. For example, Governor Beshear's push for a bipartisan incentives package, along with Kentucky's relatively low electricity costs, have reportedly played a pivotal role in Ford's plan unveiled last month to invest $5.8 billion in building EV batteries at 2 plants in Glendale, bringing 5,000 jobs to Kentucky. And in August, Toyota announced plans to build fuel cell stacks for hydrogen-powered heavy-duty commercial trucks at its Georgetown manufacturing plant in 2023. These developments speak to the swift and transformative human impact of American innovation. But the path to market for groundbreaking clean energy technologies is often long and very arduous. And that is why DOE's investments in technology commercialization are critical. My mission, OTT's mission, is to expand the commercial impact of the research investments of the department. So when we talk about commercialization, it's really about how do you take the idea of a lab researcher and translate it into a product that is used by the masses. But how does commercialization actually happen? It happens through a continuum of 4 phases known as RD, D, and D: research, development, demonstration, and deployment. In research, we conduct experiments to show a technology's potential against a certain value proposition. In development, we design and build proofs of concept and validate at the lab scale that this technology does have that potential. In demonstration, we may build a pilot scale system and we start testing technologies in real-world environments. And finally, the last phase, we move to deployment, where the technology has been de-risked, it works, the economics make sense, and there's a supply chain in place. For this morning's session on emerging industries, I've been asked to focus on emerging opportunities in hydrogen and how DOE supports moving hydrogen technology innovations from the lab to market. And in fact, one example of how we're executing on this mission is happening right here in Kentucky. Last year, the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technologies Office selected a project at the University of Kentucky. This project, which includes $5.5 million in DOE funding from the Hydrogen Fuel Cell Technology Office, is looking to develop low-cost carbon fiber to help advance hydrogen storage technologies, specifically compressed hydrogen gas tanks. On a broader scale, one of the big ways that OTT supports technology transfer across all DOE offices and programs is through the Hydrogen Shot, which is the very first division of the DOE Earthshots initiatives to launch. And that's because we recognize that hydrogen is a key technology for us to meet our climate ambitions of 100% clean energy by 2035 and net zero carbon emissions economy-wide by 2050. Moreover, the Hydrogen Shot specifically aims to accelerate innovations and reduce the cost of hydrogen by 80% to $1 per kilogram in 1 decade, 111. But how can OTT engage with stakeholders in Kentucky to help the department achieve this bold plan while advancing Governor Beshear's goal to make Kentucky a manufacturing hub for the energy transition? One recent example is through our participation in the U.S. Department of Energy Hydrogen Shot Summit. The first in a series of Earthshot summits, the virtual event convenes nearly 3,000 stakeholders online to introduce the Hydrogen Shot, solicit dialogue, and rally the global community around the urgency of tackling the climate crisis through concrete actions and innovation. A highlight of the summit was Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm's announcement launching the Hydrogen Shot Fellowship, which will help build the pipeline of professionals needed to help DOE hydrogen program achieve its goals. And as the Secretary said, ensure its economic, environmental, and societal benefits are distributed equitably across the communities that need it the most. The fellowship, which will give recent grads the chance to work alongside DOE hydrogen program managers, is just one example of how we are working to connect the DOE, our national labs, and our applied programs to you, the energy ecosystem stakeholders. So together we can leave the world in a great place for the next generation of Kentuckians. Fortunately for us, our complex includes 17 national labs and sites that support the full spectrum of research, from advanced nuclear power and renewables to life-saving medical advances to game changers in materials and national security. What DOE does to transfer these groundbreaking innovations from the lab to the market is nothing short of astounding. It's no secret that commercialization is a hard game. It takes a lot of time, a lot of capital, and a heroic amount of patience. So at OTT, we're tackling various stages across the RD&D continuum and working to fill the gaps. We're engaging the innovation ecosystem through our Technology Commercialization Fund, a $30+ million initiative that pairs labs with external partners to commercialize promising energy technologies. Our latest TCF round, announced in late June, selected 68 energy projects from 12 DOE labs across the nation, including in Kentucky, where a company in Claremont is working with Argonne National Lab on a process to efficiently and cost-effectively convert industrial carbon dioxide emissions into chemicals used in the energy, pharmaceutical, cosmetic, and other industries. We are driving economic growth through place-based innovation with our Energy Program for Innovation Clusters, or EPIC, where we fund incubators, accelerators to help us catalyze regional innovation hubs and build stronger ecosystems across the lab to market chain. We're facilitating easy access to the DOE through the Lab Partnering Service, an online tool where you can find nearly 40,000 patent applications, 287 facilities open to qualified users, and hundreds of lab researchers that you can reach out to. Go to labpartneringservice.org to find more. And that's just a small glimpse into our work here at OTT and how we engage up and down the commercialization pipeline. And although OTT is focused on helping technologies move smoothly through the RD&D continuum, it requires an ecosystem aligned behind the technologies to drive it, which includes all of you. So I look forward to sharing more during today's discussion about emerging opportunities in hydrogen and how you can take advantage of our tools and programs. I'm so excited that across the nation, states like Kentucky are embracing the transition to clean energy, and in Governor Beshear's words, operationalizing the state to be one of the leaders in creating clean energy pathways. We look forward to supporting you on that journey here at DOE and OTT. Thank you, and back to you, Kari.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. If you will turn off your camera and mute, we will get our next presenter, Mr. Matt Fry, up. There he is. Great.
Morning. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, I can. There we go. So Mr. Fry joined the Great Plains Institute in August 2021 as the state and regional policy manager, supporting the carbon management program. Matt has over 20 years of experience in natural resource management, regulation, and policy in both the public and private sectors. He served as a senior policy advisor in Wyoming to Wyoming Governor Matt Mead, where he focused on natural resources, energy, and the CCUS policy. Additionally, he developed and managed the Wyoming Pipeline Corridor Initiative, which was a project that culminated with a federal authorization for a statewide pipeline corridor system in Wyoming, intended to facilitate development of CO2 pipeline infrastructure and incentivize CCUS project deployment. Matt earned a Bachelor of Science in Biology and Chemistry from Davis and Elkins College and a Master's in Natural Resource Law from the University of Denver, Strum College of Law. Matt, thank you for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you, sir.
Great, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody this morning. As you might suspect, I'm going to dig pretty deep down the rabbit hole of policy this morning, but then I'll turn it back and see how this all relates specifically to Kentucky at the end. Just a little bit of background of the Great Plains Institute. We're a private nonprofit. Objectives are essentially to incentivize efficient and productive energy production and support carbon capture and beneficial uses of carbon across the economy. Great Plains, we've been around for about 20 years. As was just mentioned, I've been around for about 3 months, but the organization itself's been around for about 20 years. And as you can see, got a vast amount of experience across the country working on carbon management policy. Simply, the objectives, excuse me, of the Great Plains Institute are to elevate carbon capture and carbon management, provide comprehensive policy support, and then to foster economy-wide deployment of carbon capture projects. Just to give a little baseline perspective of carbon capture, this is what the environment looks like across the globe. As you can tell, it's pretty focused in specific areas, and hopefully this is going to be expanding over time. To bring it back a little closer to home, this is what carbon capture projects look like currently in the United States. We've got 13 commercial scale projects, just over 5,000 miles of CO2 pipelines. And since 2018, which was a pretty epic date, as I'll talk about in future slides with 45Q, there have been over 40 publicly announced carbon capture projects, and then the 10 new announcements within the last calendar year. So things are moving in the carbon capture world. GPI's carbon management group, we obviously focus heavily on policy. So these are our basic innovations. The Carbon Capture Coalition, they focus on the federal side, policy and legislative issues. I manage the state and the regional work. And then our most recent initiative is the Industrial Innovation Initiative, which focuses specifically on industrial uses, which is a unique challenge in itself. So as of right now, the primary federal incentive for CCUS or carbon management projects was enacted with the Future Act in 2018. And that was the reform and the expansion of the 45Q tax credit. Just due to time constraints, I won't go into depth as what that does, but it provides specific monetary tax incentives for tonnage of carbon captured at the stack for projects and facilities, and is intended to motivate and incentivize CCUS projects. As I'm sure you've read about this Congress, there's significant discussion of carbon management, and the Carbon Capture Coalition provided a letter to Congress. It's been about 2 months ago, I suppose now, with signatures of about 150 different individual stakeholders, companies, so forth. They provided what their priorities would be in legislation to come out of this congressional session. Just to read them off quickly, then one of the primary motivations was direct pay option for 45Q. They need to extend the commenced construction window for 45Q. It's taken so long to get rules and regs out as a result of the Future Act that it's going to be really tough for projects to become viable within that commenced construction window of the Future Act. Additionally, they requested that we enhance 45Q credit values. Just in general, where they came out in the Future Act was a huge step forward, but it's just not enough to motivate at this time. They also asked that the Congress eliminate the carbon capture thresholds. They have no value, there's no policy, or they're just arbitrary values that were placed in the legislation. Additional finance for build out of pipeline and storage networks, and then more robust funding for commercial scale pilot projects and demonstration programs. Certainly this is a moving target right now in Washington, but if things move forward in the bipartisan infrastructure bill, as well as the budget reconciliation, the majority of these priorities will be addressed and should help incentivize substantial increases in carbon management projects. Now we'll focus down a little bit more on the state level. State Carbon Capture Work Group, that was formed back in 2015 by Governor Meade and Governor Wolak, both not in office anymore, but it's a bipartisan work group that focuses heavily on state policy that state policymakers can implement to help facilitate carbon management projects in their states and regions. Through about 3 or 4 years of work, the State Carbon Capture Work Group produced 4 major deliverables. The first was what we call the puzzle pieces white paper. Essentially what that does is provide just a robust menu of policy drivers that states can implement to incentivize carbon capture projects. And it was heavily focused on CO2 at the time. Our next work product was focused on electricity markets, just because it's a really challenging issue when you look at CCUS. So we thought it'd be a good opportunity to provide some thoughts on how to manage that system. Then, of course, we need to look at pipeline infrastructure, because we're kind of in this chicken and egg situation where if you get the capture, you need to get the CO2 to a location. So we thought it'd be a good idea to provide some policy recommendations on how to further incentivize pipeline infrastructure. And then our final document was focused on ethanol. Ethanol's, low-hanging fruit from the carbon capture world. It's about a 99% easy capture CO2 that comes off the ethanol production. So we thought we'd talk about some economic values and policies to help boost that ethanol CO2 capture. The next initiative that came out from Governor Meade was what we called the Regional Carbon Capture and Deployment Initiative. And looking at it from a state-specific issue, it's really hard to develop a more robust network of CO2 capture and utilization. So we thought it'd be a good idea to come at it more of a regional perspective. So at this point, we've got about 500 stakeholders involved in the Regional Deployment Initiative. I'll call it the RDI. And we've had a couple of outputs at this point of pretty heavy significance. The first was an analytical report. Took about 2 years, multiple stakeholders, multiple data sets went into this. And the final outcome is basically a roadmap of how we see potential build out of CCUS and carbon management projects in both the near and short, medium, and long term. So take a look at this. That's the website. Gives what the these models interpret as excuse me, the opportunities to build out infrastructure into the future. To kind of focus in on that a little bit, we also produced some state fact sheets that are for individual states involved in the RDI, both for carbon management potential as well as jobs and economic output. And these analysis on jobs and economics were done in coordination with the Rhodium group, so they're pretty intense and solid models. We also have a state MOU associated with the RDI. At this point, there's 8 states involved. Essentially what it does is provides a framework or a platform for folks to work together to brainstorm and provide policy and so initiatives to their state policymakers to help incentivize and move forward CCUS projects in the future. Just last week, the MOU states released an action plan, which is available at this link here. And what it does is provides just a really robust policy menu of things that folks can do at both the federal and state levels to move projects forward in their states. And then the last one I'll touch on is the Industrial Innovation Initiative. In industry, you can tell it takes pretty heavily focused on the heartland where the majority of the industrial facilities are in the country. And since industry it's a unique situation for carbon capture, this group works together to come up with policies and opportunities to capture CO2 from industry, just because there's no one size fits all like you would look at from more of your thermal power production and so forth. And with all that policy background, we'll bring it back into Kentucky now and what this looks like on the ground for you folks. This model was put together based on the policy implications that we talked about earlier, as well as current market opportunities, facilities, and so forth. So what you see here in the light green, that's potential storage formations in around the area. And then the darker green, based on our modeling, that was what we have determined would be low cost storage for carbon, and low cost is less than $5 a ton. So you can see in around the specific area, there's a lot of opportunity, as well as those dots that you see or facilities that emit carbon. The amount is kind of correlated to the size of those dots, and we'll get more into it in the next slide. But lots of opportunities available for folks in Kentucky to consider and move forward on carbon capture projects. And then in a table form here, we can look at it more specifically. This was an analysis done by Rhodium, so it just takes into account industrial facilities. If you extrapolate out into the thermal facilities for both coal and gas, as well as refineries, you have some significant opportunities for carbon capture and storage in Kentucky, but just with industrial facilities based on this modeling analysis, and those which are currently available under the 45Q tax credit, which could change within, whenever that happens. You're looking at about 1,800,000 metric tons of carbon capture and storage in Kentucky. And then lastly, based on our analysis, this is what a potential pipeline infrastructure network looks like. You can see the light gray is current pipelines, and then those dark blue lines would be what we consider potential pathways for CO2 to take CO2 pipelines to go from source to sink in areas. So once again, potential for significant opportunities for CCUS and carbon management projects. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity and happy to take any questions if there's time.
Thank you, Matt. We'll try to follow up with some questions from the attendees at the end of the session. I think this was a really interesting presentation. What we're hearing from a lot of the companies that we work with here in Kentucky, as the governor or as the secretary said, Kentucky really is becoming a catalyst for industry here, and they're all of them are looking for sustainable and carbon neutral options and goals as part of their company platform. So thank you very much for the presentation. We'll follow up with you with Q&A in a little bit. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our next presenter, Mr. Kevin Self. He actually works with Schneider Electric, a very good partner that we have here in Kentucky that we've collaborated with on a lot of different projects. But Mr. Self leads strategy development, government policy, and regulatory affairs for Schneider Electric in North America. It is an 180-year-plus old global company providing digital energy and automation solutions for greater efficiency and sustainability. He is also responsible for identifying and driving new growth opportunities and partnerships. Kevin is the executive sponsor of Schneider Electric's Emerging Professionals Network and the relationship with First Robotics. He holds an MBA from Northwestern University and master's and bachelor's degrees in both engineering from the University of Michigan. Kevin, thank you so much for presenting today, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kari. Very happy to be here today and be part of the Governor's 45th Annual Conference on Energy and the Environment. To Kari's point, we do have a great presence in the state of Kentucky. I'll share that with you in a moment. To kick things off, though, sustainability, efficiency, and resiliency, three critical words that really drive the core of what Schneider is doing in the US, in Kentucky, and across the world today. Probably a decade ago, the focus was more sustainability and efficiency. But given the various climate issues over the past couple of years, resiliency is as important now as ever. And so here's our mission: to be the digital partner for both sustainability and efficiency. We as a company believe that the main challenge of this generation is climate and climate change, which is not good news. But the good news is this is the generation that's come to know about it. We're the generation, and probably the only generation, that can change the trajectory of carbon emissions and therefore climate change. And we very much look forward to partnering with many to drive this. This will not be solved by any one company, it will be solved by a collection. We also believe that energy needs to become more decarbonized, more digitized, and more decentralized for this to work. And we're actively pursuing that. So Schneider Electric, as mentioned, we're a 186-year-old company, initially started in France, now with presence around the world, as you can see, fairly evenly distributed: North America, Asia, Western Europe, and the rest of the world. We have presence in over 150 countries. In the way that you solve sustainability, efficiency, and resiliency is very dependent upon the country in which you sit. And so we've really altered our business model to be able to deliver. About 26 billion euros in revenue, 5% of revenue is devoted to R&D, including in the state of Kentucky, and 41% of the revenue is from new economies. From a US perspective, about $8 billion in revenues, major presence across the country, and what we're probably most proud of is earlier this year, Corporate Knights designated us as the world's most sustainable company. So very proud to have received that award, but it's just an award with much future in front of it and a lot of work to be done. As you can see, we have a broad presence across the US and are really involved in all segments and all states to help drive the comments I made earlier about energy efficiency and sustainability. Specifically in Kentucky, we have over 1,000 employees across the state. We are very, very proud of our facility in Lexington. Our 64-year-old smart factory in Lexington. A year ago in September, we received the designation from the World Economic Forum in McKinsey as being a lighthouse factory. Sorry about that. And what's even cooler is last month, we were named one of the sustainability lighthouse factories by the World Economic Forum. The facilities, driving costs down 26%, energy reduction 30%, net CO2 reduction, and 20% water use. And so the comment about you can't teach old dogs new tricks, we've actually changed the discussion on that. And then, 90 miles away or so in Louisville is where our energy and sustainability services company sits. Some of you might remember it from 11 years ago, named Summit Energy when we acquired it. One of the great announcements was made about a year ago now with Walmart, where we're working with them in collaboration with all their suppliers to drive greater access to renewable energy. And so both from a manufacturing footprint, as well as working in this digitization of energy and ensuring that everyone can procure clean energy, very much engaged across that forum. And as you can see on the bottom, also working with local Kentucky companies such as Brown-Forman to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So what is our vision of the future? As you look at buildings, and what we firmly believe is that for us to really combat climate change, electrification is a critical component, and it's electrification of both the built environment and the electrification of transportation. So sustainability and returning resources to our planet rather than just using them, resiliency and the ability to withstand both internal and external challenges, hyper efficiency, leveraging real-time data to be more responsive and delivering more for less, and then the people centricity, offering a safe and healthy environment that exceeds expectations. I mean, a lot of times these are seen as trade-offs. You have to do one but not the other. But what we believe is that by working collectively, you can solve for all of these at the same time. Not easy to do, takes a lot of partnerships to do the work, and we have some great examples where we have driven this. And one of those examples is in the state of Maryland with United Therapeutics. They had approached us a couple of years ago with a desire to put a building in place that is net zero. Actually, they want it to be net negative energy. And so we've worked with them over a couple of years. It was, I think, launched about 2 years ago, pre-pandemic. And the emphasis was on green innovation, photovoltaic energy harvesting, rainwater collections, electrochromatic glass, geothermal heat recovery, planet optimization software. And what we're able to do via our systems is on this bottom layer are all the connected products, which are the sensors, which are managing and understanding how things are working. The next level, you have edge control where you can manage all of those systems. And then at the third layer, we call it our EcoStruxure offering, our EcoStruxure Building Advisor. That's the point where you can optimize. And really what you can do is based on time of day, day of week, month of year, you're able to determine what's most important from a sustainability, from a resiliency, or from an efficiency standpoint. And our capabilities allow that to be driven. What we're also starting to do is apply this same technology into the very quickly growing indoor agriculture space, of which I know there's a number of partners of ours within the state of Kentucky that are actively determining how they can grow their businesses even faster. And it's interesting from an indoor agriculture standpoint, some of the greatest cost is actually the energy cost. If you think about it, providing lighting, temperature control for 24/7, 365, the management of energy is a critical component, and our systems are able to help partners in driving those needs. And let me turn real quickly to the electrification of transportation. We formed a partnership 2 years ago with the Carlyle Group and formed a company called Electrification. The intent is to provide technology solutions along with financing for what we call energy as a service. So Montgomery County is just outside of Washington, D.C. 2 years ago, we put in 2 microgrids to their general services facility, their county services facility, also houses their police and fire. They were able to get more reliable, more sustainable, more resilient energy and paid $0 down. We worked with a third party who's financing the effort, and Montgomery County is just paying for the energy as they use it. 2 years later, we had a groundbreaking last month in Montgomery County. They're now in the process of taking their 400+ municipal bus fleet and electrifying it. And as all of you know, or some of you who've started to electrify your own vehicles, the big question is, how actually do I fuel it? How actually do I electrify these? And so we're breaking ground on the first of their handful of sites where this electrification will occur. Once again, the county, Montgomery County, is paying nothing out of pocket, and they will be financing this over time with this energy as a service solution. Fairly new solution being written about over probably the last year. We're one of the leaders in this to ensure that financing or the lack of funding isn't holding back what we need to do as a state, as a country, as a planet to get to these carbon reduction goals. And that is it. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm honestly speechless. I mean, I knew Schneider had a lot of stuff going on, but when it comes to innovation, it's definitely you guys are leading the pack in all of that. So thank you for the presentation. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who has been a true public servant for most of his time and career here in the Commonwealth, Mr. Dorsey Ridley. He has a successful 30+ year career, not only serving the Commonwealth, but he is currently the Executive Director of Emerging Industry in the Governor's Office. He previously served in the Kentucky House of Representatives from 1987 to 94 and the State Senate as Senate Caucus Chair from 2004 to 2018. A graduate of Western Kentucky University, he received his bachelor's in business and agriculture, and a resident of Henderson County, where he grew up on a working family cattle farm. Mr. Ridley is a lifelong advocate for the agricultural industry, and it's my pleasure to introduce him as our next speaker. Sir?
Kara, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Good morning, everyone, and we're just proud that you all are spending your time this morning attending Governor Andy Beshear's 45th Annual Conference on Energy and the Environment. We want to give a quick overview of the Governor's Office of Emerging Industries. We work with the Cabinet for Economic Development led by Secretary Larry Hayes. We also work with the Environment Cabinet led by the Energy and Environment Cabinet led by Secretary Rebecca Goodman, as well as Governor Andy Beshear's office to attract new emerging industries to the Commonwealth, utilizing multiple platforms that we'll discuss. Thus far, Governor Beshear has seen a lot of traction in attracting new industries, and therefore the governor is obviously moving the Commonwealth forward. The first one we'll discuss is electric vehicles, both cars and trucks, and the opportunity that Ford Motor Company and its partner, SK, when they decided and planned to build 2 plants in Glendale, Kentucky, that will manufacture batteries as it prepares to ramp up its fleet of electric vehicles. We see that as a real future in the automotive industry here in Kentucky. And as a sidebar, in my career, my family was in the automotive sales and service in General Motors and Ford vehicles. And so emerging into electrification of automobiles is so important for the future. They're decided, the Ford company and its partner SK decided to build a $5.8 billion campus in central Kentucky, and it's called the Blue Oval SK Battery Park. And it opens in the year, we hope, 2025, and will bring 5,000 new jobs to Kentucky. Governor Beshear made this statement that this is the single largest investment in the history of our state, and this project solidifies Kentucky's leadership role in the future of the automotive manufacturing industry. It will transform our economy, creating better Kentucky and giving more opportunities for our families for generations to come. Our economy is currently on fire, and maybe it's electric, as he said. Our time is now, our future is now. And as we look through the press and look at media, they indicate that the national folks are saying that that economic development leaders are saying that Ford's investment is a real game changer for Kentucky. Advanced manufacturing is something else that the governor is working diligently on, and the announcement like Pratt Industries, a worldwide leader in paper, has decided to build a facility in Henderson. Pratt will recycle container board, saving thousands of trees each year and becoming an environmentally sustainable facility, and therefore creating hundreds of jobs while bringing international partnership to Kentucky. Governor Beshear indicated that this is a significant investment in Kentucky, and one that Pratt Paper becoming the greenest, environmentally sustainable paper facility in the world. Pratt is a company with vision for the future, and I couldn't be more proud that the future will include Kentucky. We're just rebuilding and adding to our economy here in Kentucky, and we're surging ahead to levels that we've not unseen before. This is happening because great companies like Pratt Paper and strong leaders, their chief executive officer, Anthony Pratt, can see Kentucky as we head forward into the future with skilled workforce and partnership that will succeed. Other emerging industries such as agritech and hydrogen Both are coming in collaboration with the federal government support and international support, such as the Dutch government and the Kentucky Agri-Tech Controlled Environment effort that we're putting together. And in the Agri-Tech component, Governor Beshear has made it a part of his emerging industry policy strategy. This is where we blend agriculture and advanced manufacturing together. And this new approach is we need to have, because we need to be able to feed the nation as it continues to add population and we continue to move into the future. And we'll do this with that controlled environment structure and strategy that folks like At Harvest and Fresh Harvest are using to target food source for the future. And as a result, we're looking to target bringing advanced manufacturing into Kentucky that will produce items that are needed for that type of agriculture. And then there's another thing that we have on our horizon with regards to agrivoltaic efforts in Kentucky, meaning blending solar panels and the electricity it provides to our agricultural community. The governor did a ribbon cutting down at Murray State University a few months ago, where we had investors install solar panels, and the effort is for those young farmers and students to try to understand how that agrivoltaic effort could be used on their farm in the future. And then we're really excited about the prospects for hydrogen here in Kentucky, where Toyota has sought to commercialize hydrogen-powered vehicles that they've been working on for decades, and it intends to produce fuel cell modules at its massive Kentucky auto assembly plant for the use of zero-emission cross-country, the big rigs, and the heavy-duty commercial vehicles. It's an effort that we really look forward to, and the automaker indicated that they will upscale their line at the Georgetown, Kentucky plant and begin assembling these electrochemical devices in 2023. Toyota said that the fuel cell modules produce 160 kilowatts of continuous electricity and are part of a propulsion system that include high-powered batteries, electric motors, and obviously hydrogen tanks. They're working, Toyota is working with its subsidiary Henno to power these hydrogen semi-trucks that will supply, and they will supply fuel cell modules that are made in Kentucky for other manufacturers. This type of announcement will help Kentucky operationalize hydrogen and help the Commonwealth become a regional hydrogen hub. At Team Kentucky, we're excited to carry forward Governor Beshear's announcement of the Kentucky 3E strategy to the Commonwealth. This new energy strategy will allow for continued growth in Kentucky and for new emerging industries. Kari, I want to turn it back to you, and I want to thank those who have been listening, and we appreciate you being a part of this.
Thank you, Senator. It's definitely a exciting time here in the Commonwealth with what's going on with our economic development and the potential growth. So thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And with that, we will get our last presenter for the session today up. Frank, are you there?
All right.
Okay, there, and I can hear you now.
Yep.
Great.
Okay.
Sir?
And let me give a little, share my screen if I can try to do that.
Sure. While you're working on that, I'll give a quick introduction to our attendees.
Sure.
So Mr. Wolak is the president and CEO of Washington, D.C. based Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association. This is an organization that represents over 65 leading international and domestic companies and organizations that are advancing innovative, clean, safe, and reliable energy technologies. Prior to developing the association and coming to the association, Frank was a senior vice president at Fuel Cell Energy, Inc., where he initiated and developed some of the most innovative and largest fuel cell technology applications in the world. Mr. Wolak has experience in all facets of energy, including executive positions outside of the fuel cell and hydrogen industry at an international energy services company, a power development and investment company, Public Energy Resources Corporation, and as a management consultant providing insight to clients in emerging technology and utility segments. Sir, it looks like we can see your presentation, so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, along with my other panelists here, I'm pleased to be presenting here at the 45th Conference on Energy Environment. And I want to thank Governor Beshear and his teams at the Office of Emerging Industries, Office of Energy Policy, Department of Environmental Protection for putting together a great webinar. And I also want to thank those I interface with among the staff for helping me navigate through the technology to be prepared to do this presentation. So thank you for all. I want to make a comment here before I sort of open up about who we are and what this presentation is about. But as I was reviewing materials for this presentation, I was struck by three things. One, that Kentucky is well positioned to draw upon both fossil and renewable resources for hydrogen production. We'll get into these a little bit later. The other factor is that Kentucky has geological features and industries that make it unique, I really think unique among states with the potential for hydrogen applications. And moreover, and perhaps lastly, Kentucky, whether all of you see this or not, I really think Kentucky sits at the center of the energy transition. It has a deep heritage and technical knowledge of traditional resources, and it has the opportunity, I really believe, to leverage that knowledge to be a leader in reestablishing the base of new jobs, expanding new technical employment, and also, as I see it, being at the leading edge of hydrogen applications. More to follow. A bit about our organization. It was briefly introduced, but I'm the president and CEO of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association. We are the leading industry association for fuel cells and hydrogen in the United States. We have over 65 companies and organizations advancing clean, safe, reliable energy technology. We're based here in Washington, D.C., but we try to look for value for all of our members across states and regions. Our members include a variety of companies, very familiar names, and they range from auto manufacturers, fuel cell technology manufacturers, electrolysis manufacturing companies, energy associations, and a number of companies in the value chain and supply chain of hydrogen technologies, all driven toward improving the opportunities for hydrogen and fuel cell technology across the United States. I want to start with, I'm going to be taking a few excerpts from a roadmap that our association put together with McKinsey and Company, and I modified it for this discussion today. And the roadmap really starts out with, I think, what this is simplified chart. And as anybody that develops a roadmap around hydrogen, you have to ask, well, why is this important? What is the merits of hydrogen that make it so interesting right now in the country? And you really have two things happening. One is an electric grid infrastructure with a variety of resources, some of which Kentucky is very blessed with, being used to produce electricity. And then you have on the right side of this, a number of potential industry uses where hydrogen is an optimal low carbon fuel and low carbon resource. It's the combination of this trend to move toward more electrification and to introduce low carbon fuels and low carbon applications to technologies that makes this merging of giant energy industries, where hydrogen serves as both a carrier, a storage medium, as well as just a fuel, an end-use fuel. And there's a potency in this chart that really underlies many of the things that were talked about this morning by Vanessa Chan and our other panelists about what the Department of Energy is doing and what the federal government is doing. I'm going to switch to this rather quickly. Our outline of our roadmap identified 5 uses of hydrogen. They're fairly obvious. Hydrogen used in power generation, including storage, hydrogen used for feedstock for industry, hydrogen used in the transportation sector as a fuel to replace diesel fuel and to enable different types of transportation modes. Fuel for industry is direct input for products, and then certainly fuel for residential and commercial buildings, perhaps even considered in some of the applications that Schneider is looking at. But these 5 uses of hydrogen really form the framework of the diversity of this wonderful resource. As we were laying out our roadmap, we felt it important for policymakers to really understand, well, why would hydrogen be so valuable? Why would we need this? And the end goals here by 2050, based on inputs in our roadmap, which is available on our website, by the way, that the U.S. economy could benefit by over $750 billion in new revenue, 3.4 million jobs. Hydrogen, if it's resourced from domestic fuels and domestic production, renewable electricity, is a 100% domestically produced resource. And the contribution that hydrogen could make in an optimum sense could reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 16%. Now, when you think of the fact that the United States has about 6 million metric tons of CO2, that 16% reflects taking about 1 million metric tons out of the atmosphere, along with the benefits of reducing nitrous oxides. So there's a big backdrop to why is there so much interest currently in adding hydrogen to the resource mix that the country currently enjoys. We felt it important also in this roadmap to start out informing policymakers and other audience participants that there is a significant amount of hydrogen used in the United States today. There is about 11.4 million metric tons consumed, and it has a $17 billion value in the market value. That hydrogen today is generally manufactured from steam methane reforming, which is a separation of hydrogen from natural gas, and about 23% comes from byproduct production of hydrogen from refining. Our roadmap lays out a capacity to go from the 11 million metric tons today and to look at pathways to introduce new fuel uses into a 2030 timeframe and further, with an ultimate goal that by 2050, with a significant amount of government interest, industry interest, and societal interest in shifting to lower carbon applications, we could have up to 63 million metric tons of hydrogen used in a variety of ways: power generation, fuel for industry, transportation, existing feedstocks, and then also the ability to utilize hydrogen in the production of fertilizers and ammonia. Ultimately, this could yield upwards of 14% of U.S. energy demand could be met by hydrogen by 2050. One of the items that is key in many of the U.S. policies today, and it will drive the application of hydrogen, is how do you migrate from a hydrogen that is currently produced almost exclusively from natural gas to one that is low carbon. And we, as an organization within this roadmap, looked at adoption of low carbon hydrogen as pathway agnostic. It'll come from water electrolysis using low carbon electricity, a continued use of reformer-based hydrogen with carbon capture, which is a subject that I'll talk about specifically in Kentucky because it certainly has benefits, as were described earlier. The direct gasification from municipal waste, introducing new ways to produce hydrogen, and then additional byproduct hydrogen recovered from industrial processes. The ultimate goal is to introduce more and more hydrogen as a valuable resource and do it in a way that we transition to the lowest carbon hydrogen possible. This chart was used in several of our presentations because it's noteworthy, and it's been embedded in several pieces that Kentucky's developed. It has certainly been embedded in the Great Plains work that is being considered not just in Kentucky but elsewhere, that the U.S. is blessed with geological features that also allow for the continued use of fossil-based fuels for the production of hydrogen, and the ability to consider carbon capture and storage. And the circle here in the middle of this map, the overlaid, is just simply an obvious point that Kentucky happens to sit in a very unique area geologically, where there's hydrogen production, industrial fuels industrial materials being made, chemicals, as well as a number of features from existing gas and oil operations that make for some very interesting potential places where carbon capture could emerge, and Kentucky could be a leader in the utilization of carbon capture. As we look into the economic subject, this chart here works from the lower left corner to the upper right corner. The pictures around the periphery on the left-hand side show forklifts, distributed power, fuel cell applications, and light-duty vehicles with hydrogen. And then over in the right-hand side, we look at emerging applications, steel making. BMW just announced today that it will be procuring fuel from a Swedish steel maker, 100% green produced steel. Transportation, we're all pleased to hear about the good work that Toyota is doing in expanding its fuel cell production in Kentucky. That vehicle on the upper right is indicative of the kinds of vehicles that could use those powertrains. And there are considerations of fuel cell vehicles in all kinds of transportation applications, marine as well as rail. This roadmap, and kind of where this whole direction of hydrogen heads, moves from the lower left-hand corner, where there are existing uses of hydrogen for transportation, forklifts, distributed generation, and we are seeing the buildup of applications for light-duty passenger vehicles, and then a very strong market in medium and heavy-duty trucks. That will begin to yield diversity with the right level of government resources applied and new technology applications. You will clearly see, beyond simply transportation and use in fuel cells and vehicles, that the applications of blending hydrogen for heating, introduction of low carbon fuel for aviation, new uses in feedstocks for chemicals, high-grade industrial heat, and then moving into the real ambitious targets of making steel with low carbon hydrogen, low carbon fuel for marine applications, and then low carbon fuel for even centralized power with the ability to deliver hydrogen directly to existing turbines for co-production. This map here really lays out that Kentucky sits in many ways, as I pointed out, at the center of a transition that will yield applications such as the upper right corner, and is really uniquely positioned with jobs, diversity, industries, chemicals, and other applications that are really poised to take advantage of this wonderful resource. Snapshot of where the U.S. government is currently. Many of you may be aware that there are several bills pending. The U.S. government is looking very aggressively at over $9.5 billion in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, at regional hydrogen hubs, clean electrolysis research, and then clean hydrogen manufacturing. There are a number of other features within this particular act. I won't get into all of them, but they're all valuable in their own way for enhancing the way hydrogen is used and developing new applications. And similarly, here in the US, we regularly apply tax policies as a way to stimulate investment. It was very successful in building our renewable resources of wind and solar. There are a number of features sitting both in the US Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee under two separate acts pending that will look at a new 30% tax credit for medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles, a production tax credit for hydrogen production, an expansion of the energy credit and advanced energy products tax credits, and some very interesting extensions and enhancements of carbon capture credits. They're labeled with a variety of numbers that Matt had identified in his charts. I kept them off the list because there are a lot of subsets and subsections of these bills. The point of this chart is there's a great deal of interest in Congress to look at advancing hydrogen technologies, all with the goal of improving manufacturing, reducing emissions, and making the U.S. a far better positioned place vis-a-vis the rest of the world in hydrogen. What does it mean for Kentucky? I'll leave this as part of our question slide. Ultimately, this means economic activity and environmental benefits. The picture here ties back to the subject of Toyota Motor Manufacturing. This is actually a photo of their fuel cell module that is produced in Kentucky. It is going to be the anchor of many heavy-duty vehicles, and we're proud to have Toyota as a member of our association. It was interesting when I looked at this chart, and I did not intentionally look at the building this chart around the other members of the panelists, but if you look at what Dorsey had described, he was very eager to look at accelerating existing and new manufacturing. Matt touched on the deep efforts to consider ways in which carbon capture sites can be utilized, where Kentucky is blessed with a lot of geological resources. Kevin is certainly at the core of energy efficiency and conservation. And while that may not all employ hydrogen technologies, there certainly is a lot of effort within U.S. policy to expand the good work that energy efficiency and conservation has done. And Vanessa really hit on perhaps the most key item of all this is the expansion of technology jobs. As we look at hydrogen as a means to transition jobs from older industries to newer industries, and the application of intellectual property and advanced metals and advanced applications of manufacturing, there will be an expansion of technology jobs, which is really a benefit of our ultimate goal of reducing carbon and making the United States a far better place to live, and certainly Kentucky a much better place to visit and to live. With that, I'll pass it over to the rest of the panel or to Q&A. Thank you.
Frank, thank you so much. That was a great way to end the session, that last slide, so I appreciate that. With that, I would just request that all of the panelists on this session please turn on their cameras and unmute, and we will open it up for Q&A.
Okay, our first question comes to Matt Fry. The commenter asks how CO2 can be stored that will keep it out of the atmosphere, and express some concerns about the market and uses of CO2 beyond enhanced oil recovery.
The first question was, how can it be stored?
Yes, the first question is, how can it be stored that will actually keep it out of the atmosphere?
The proposals at this point are to store it geologically. So you would pump it down into geological sinks, and it's stored in the pore space of those geological rock and the subsurface. I'm not a geologist, so there's probably people that can speak better to it than me, but the theory is that once it gets into this pore space and they're adequately addressed and captured, there's a cap rock over top that doesn't allow that CO2 to re-enter the atmosphere. It's pretty sound science and pretty safe based on all the understanding and the research that's happened over time. And the reality is oil, gas, things of those natures have been stored in these geologic pore spaces for centuries. So the thought is that there would be no reason for this CO2 to re-emerge back into the atmosphere, assuming wells are capped and so forth appropriately. And the second part of the question was?
Second question was, there's a concern about the lack of market or uses for CO2 other than enhanced oil recovery. Are you aware of any research is going on or ways to identify uses of CO2?
You bet, yeah. So clearly EOR was the focus early on, just because that was the way that you could generate income from both storage, the 45Q tax credit, as well as profits from oil and gas development. But at this point, the majority of the projects that are coming forward for discussion are focused on saline storage specifically, just because that's what folks think the emerging technology is going to require. But there's a lot of work going on for potential opportunities for products associated with CO2. I live and work in Wyoming. We're heavily involved in the fossil fuel industry, so it's extremely important here. We have an integrated test center up at one of our coal-fired power plant facilities where we provide companies the opportunity to come in and do research on ways to produce actual products associated with carbon dioxide. And I know that research is going on around the country. At this point, broad market acceptance of these products isn't available, but there's a lot of research and development going on to try to make them so.
Our next question is for Kevin Self. What can states and cities do to make it easier for controlled environment companies to locate and succeed in Kentucky? Are there more or different sustainability tax incentives?
Yeah, it's obviously it's quite complicated, right? As we talk to our global colleagues, it's not just a single energy system across the U.S. It's the states and then the counties, then the segments within them. What we've done is we are actively advocating in every state, working very closely with the governor's office here in Kentucky, raising awareness. I think what's key is even driving the awareness to the voter level, to the constituents level, so they understand the links between what we're trying to do and the impact it has on them. There is also difficult to find at times, but a lot of data. Actually, I'd argue the Department of Energy has a lot of it that allows some of the organizations we work with to really identify where are the best opportunities to target across the U.S. from a demand side. And then also working very closely to understand what are the policy implications in one state versus the next, or one county versus the next.
Our next question is also for Kevin. Could you speak to cybersecurity issues and solutions that you are addressing? And other panelists also may have some input.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly important. Obviously, very much in the news these days. You haven't thought about it until it hits you. Similar to electricity, you don't think about it till you're without power for minutes, hours, weeks. We actually are quite engaged. We actually, a year ago in September, via the Department of Energy Citrix program, we were the first company to engage with them to basically provide our equipment for them to run through their labs to find the various, where things could be hacked. And so our company is engaged across the spectrum, both with the government, federal and state, as well as with associations, driving our products as best we can to ensure that they're fully hardened.
Our next question is for Matt Fry. Would these CO2 deposits be mapped to prevent accidentally releasing them with some type of drilling operation? Could you comment on how storage is managed and mapped?
Sure. Yeah, there's federal programs, and some are managed by state programs specifically for long-term storage. There's a Class 6 well requirement that's folks would have to go through the permitting process to receive a Class 6 permit, and then associated with that, there's a long-term MRV, which is a monitoring plan associated with carbon storage. So everything has to be delineated subsurface. Their application has to be processed, and then they have long-term, like 50 years, I believe, worth of monitoring requirements. So the potential for someone to accidentally drill into these geological surfaces is pretty much impossible, I would guess, but some might have a different perspective.
Okay, our last question asks if there are any plans for the cabinet to consider Class 6 primacy for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Since none of our panelists are necessarily involved in that process, I've been told that there are not plans at this time to do that for our cabinet. And with that, Elaine, I believe, and Kari, do you have any wrap up for our session?
I don't. Just thank you everybody for the time today. It was a great session, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Kari, for moderating that session, and to all the speakers. That was indeed a thoughtful, thought-provoking and informative session, and I look forward to learning more about the future here in Kentucky. I am pleased to introduce once again our Office of Energy Policy Executive Director, Kenya Stump, who will introduce our next speaker.